Hello guys. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about Harith, one of the most popular hero in the current meta. In this video, I'll be covering everything you need to know about Harith, including his passive, skills, builds, emblems, along with some tips and guide on how to use him in a match. So without further ado, let's get started with the video. Currently, Harith has been dominating the higher ranks as one of the most picked heroes, and despite being a mage, he is mostly used as the gold laner. In this video, I will cover everything about Harith, starting with his passive and skills, and after explaining his passive and skills, I will show you the best builds and emblems for him. And I will also teach you how to switch your items depending on the situation. And lastly, I will explain how to use him in a match. So, as always, in order to master a hero, you must first understand how their passive and skills work. So let's start with his first skill. And after that, I will explain how his passive ability works. With the help of his first skill, Harith releases 2 energy waves in the target direction, dealing 500 magic damage to all enemies in the explosion area. And when using this skill, if the enemies are not in the circle of your first skill, then you will deal only 200 magic damage. So make sure that the enemies are in the middle of your first skill. And that way, you will be able to deal full damage to the enemies. And this skill is your main source of damage, so make sure to max out this skill first. And this skill has a low cooldown, so make sure to take that to your advantage by constantly poking and harassing the enemies using this skill. And if you're playing against enemies with multiple dash or blink abilities, then I'd recommend you to properly aim this skill before using it, as auto-tapping isn't very effective when playing against enemies with dash and blink abilities. Now, let's talk about his passive ability. With the help of his passive, Harith gains 7% hybrid lifesteal for each nearby enemy hero. Meaning, if there is one enemy hero near you, you will gain 7% hybrid lifesteal. And if there are 2 enemies near you, then you will gain 14% hybrid lifesteal. And the more enemies there are, the more hybrid lifesteal you will gain. And this passive ability can get stacked up to 5 times. Meaning you can gain up to 35% hybrid lifesteal during a teamfight. And if you don't know what hybrid lifesteal is, then let me explain. Hybrid lifesteal means both spell vamp and lifesteal combined. And spell vamp will heal you when dealing damage with your skills. And lifesteal will heal you when dealing damage with your basic attacks. And since it says hybrid lifesteal, it means that you can recover your HP using both your basic attacks and skills. And this passive is really useful, especially during a teamfight, as it increases your sustainability by a lot. Now, let's move on and talk about his second skill. With the help of this skill, you can dash towards a targeted direction. And upon using this skill, you will gain a shield, and your next basic attack will also get enhanced. And your enhanced basic attack will deal 200 magic damage to the enemies, and also slow them by 40%. And hitting the enemies with your enhanced basic attack will reduce the cooldown of this skill by 3 seconds. This skill is your bread and butter skill, as you can use this skill to reposition yourself during a teamfight. And always make sure to use your basic attack after using this skill, as your enhanced basic attack can deal a huge amount of damage. Now, let's talk about his ultimate skill. With the help of his ultimate, Harith summons the Zaman Force. And when you are inside your ultimate, the cooldown of your second skill will be reduced by 3 seconds. And the cooldown of your first skill will also be reduced by 1 second. And you will also gain 15% resilience when you are inside your ultimate. This skill makes you virtually untouchable during fights, due to its cooldown reduction effects, as you can continuously keep dashing when you are inside your ultimate, making it difficult for the enemies to land their attacks on you. It will take some time to fully master dashing on his ultimate, but as you keep playing, you will eventually get used to it. And I know, most people will say their second skill still has a cooldown even when you are inside your ultimate. And if that's happening with you, then it means that you don't have enough cooldown reduction. In order to use Harith properly, you will need at least 20% cooldown reduction. But I'd recommend you to have at least 30% cooldown reduction, and that way, you will be able to dash inside his ultimate without having to wait for its cooldown. And in order to achieve 30% cooldown reduction, all you need to do is copy the builds and emblems from this video. And always make sure to use your basic attack after using your second skill, since hitting the enemies with your enhanced basic attack will reduce the cooldown of your second skill. Now, let's move on and talk about his builds. For Harith, you must prioritize going for items that will provide you with cooldown reduction and magical power. And for that, this is the best build for him. This build will provide you with magic power, along with cooldown reduction. But if you're playing against tanky enemies, or enemies with healing abilities, then I'd recommend you to go for this build. This build will allow you to melt and counter tanky enemies. Now, let's move on and talk about his emblems and talents. For his emblem, it's recommended to go for the Mage emblem, as it is the best emblem for Harith. The Mage emblem will provide you with plus 30 magic power, plus 5% cooldown reduction, along with plus 8 magic penetration. And for his first talent, it's recommended to go for Inspire. Inspire will provide you with plus 5 cooldown reduction, meaning you will have 10% cooldown reduction with just your emblem and this talent alone, which is very good, considering Harith relies on cooldown reduction a lot. And for his second talent, go for Weapon Master. Weapon Master will increase the magical power you gain for items, equipments, and emblems by 5%. And for his core talent, it's recommended to go for Impure Rage. Impure Rage will increase the damage of your skills, and it will also restore 2% of your mana upon hitting an enemy hero. Now, let's move on and talk about his gameplay. Harith can be played as the gold laner, mid laner, and also as the fighter or jungler. But since he is mostly used as the marksman, I will focus on his gameplay as the gold laner. So let's start by talking about his early game. During the early game, make sure to unlock your first skill first, as it is your main source of damage. And after that, buy your boots, and after buying boots, you should immediately start buying your first core item, which is Starlium Scythe. And once you finish buying Starlium Scythe, you can upgrade your boots. And that way, you will have your core item quicker than your opponent marksman, allowing you to deal more damage. And during the early game, make sure to unlock your first skill first. And once you have your first skill, make sure to use your first skill to constantly poke and harass the enemy hero. And you can also use your first skill to last hit the minions. And remember, last hitting the minions will give you more gold, so make sure to keep that in mind. And you must not take a proper fight during this stage. And you must only poke the enemy using your first skill. And once the enemy has low HP, you can try going for the kill. But I'd recommend you to go for the kill only if the enemy marksman is alone. And if you're not sure about the enemy being alone or not, then you should just wait and play safe until you are able to know about his teammate's location. And you must also expect the enemy's jungler and tank to gank your lane. So you must always keep an eye on the mini-map, so that you will know if the enemies are trying to gank your lane. And if you don't see any enemies on the map, then it probably means the enemies are coming to your lane. So it's very important to have map awareness, as keeping an eye on the mini-map will not only tell you about the enemy's position, it will also help you predict the enemy's next move. And that way, you will be able to avoid getting ganked by the enemies. Remember, it's a great thing if you're able to kill the enemy marksman during the early game. But you must not be greedy, as being greedy for kills will lead to your death. And dying more than once during the early game will greatly decrease your farm and level. So, your early game priorities should be playing safe, reaching level 4, poking the enemy without overextending, and farming. Now, let's talk about his mid-game. During the mid-game, you should have at least 1 or 2 of your core items. And this is the stage where Harith starts to shine the most. So you must take that to your advantage by rotating around the map, and helping your teammates by joining the team fights. And you must also help your jungler take the turtle and lord. And since you're playing as the gold laner, your main priority should always be pushing turrets. And during a fight, you must always remember to use your basic attack after using your second skill. And even if you help your teammates by joining teamfights, you should never leave your lane wide open, as leaving your lane will allow the enemy to push. So even if you join teamfights, you must always go back to your lane, right after the teamfight. And that way, the enemy won't be able to push your lane. And once you finish pushing your lane, you must try pushing the other lanes. Remember, you must always try to push turrets during the mid-game, since you will mostly be busy joining teamfights during the late game. Plus, pushing the turret during the late game is also dangerous, as you never know if the enemies are camping, waiting for you in the bush. So your mid-game priorities should be pushing turrets, helping your teammates by joining teamfights, and rotating around the map. And Harith is weak against heroes like Minzatar, Khufra, and Esmeralda. So make sure to be careful when playing against these heroes, as these are the heroes that can counter Harith. Now, let's talk about his late game. During the late game, Harith can deal an insane amount of damage. But even though he can deal a lot of damage, he is still a mage at the end of the day. So you must play safely, as one stun or CC from the enemies is all it takes to go back to base. So always wait for your teammates to engage, and never initiate a fight by yourself. And during teamfights, you must always stay behind your teammates, as you are the main damage dealer of your team, so the enemies will always try to kill you first. So you must try not being the focus of the enemies, and always wait at least 1 or 2 seconds before entering the teamfight. Remember, during the late game, timing and positioning is the key to winning. So you must always be patient, and you must always wait for the right opportunity to enter the fight. And you must never roam around the map alone during the late game, and you must always stay with your tank or fighter. And never go into unchecked bushes, as you never know if the enemies are camping. So always use your first skill to check bushes, or just wait for your tank to check the bushes. And you must also take the Lord whenever possible, as taking down the Lord is the job of the gold laner. And taking down the Lord will greatly increase the chances of being able to end the game. Plus, Harith can easily take down the Lord using his ultimate. And if you're planning on using Harith, then I'd recommend you to ban Minzatar and Khufra, as these two heroes can counter Harith very efficiently. And always remember that you will need at least 20% cooldown reduction in order to use Harith properly. So make sure to keep that in mind, and that is all for today. So, what do you think about Harith? Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments, and if you have watched the video this far, then consider leaving a like on the video. And subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. I make tutorials and informative videos about the game. Thank you for watching.